I mean, there were leaders who worked in many technology companies that were very inclusive and innovative, and I wanted to be able to tell those stories. And if you look at the companies that are more successful in my book, it's really people who embraced how can you solicit ideas from all your people and provide forums where ideas can be surfaced and listened to and criticized.
Welcome to the Feria Techcast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today we are joined by Telle Whitney, a consultant, senior executive leader, and recognized expert and advocate for diversity and women in technology. Telle has been called a pioneer for the promotion of women technologists and was named one of the Fast Company's most influential women in technology. He served as CEO of the Anita Borg Institute from 2002 to 2017 and co-founded the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing Conference. Prior to joining the Anita Borg Institute, she was Vice President of Engineering for Malleable Technologies. She holds a PhD in Computer Science and is now a speaker and consultant helping executives and their companies create cultures where diverse teams thrive. So, Telle, welcome to the show.
It's lovely to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. So, let's dive in. You have been at the forefront of the movement for women in tech since co-founding the Grace Hopper Celebration. Looking back, what was the core insight or frustration that made you realize this systemic work was necessary beyond just individual success stories?
Well, so you go back, for me, you go back further than the 1994 first Grace Hopper celebration. I mean, I first of all discovered computer science. My undergraduate was at the University of Utah, which is a large public university, very well respected. When I went to graduate school at Caltech, there just was not very many women. When I arrived in Silicon Valley, I was eager and, in fact, desperate to meet other women. And through reaching out and through connections from work, I found a group mostly out of Stanford, of women, and that's when I first met Dr. Anita Borg. She and I co-founded the Grace Hopper Celebration together, and there weren't that many. All of us worked in companies where we were one of a few. And so the idea of celebrating the achievements of women just made sense at the time.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's talk about your book, Rebooting Tech Culture. What was the motivation behind you writing that book? And who were the target readers you had in mind while you were writing the book? And what values did you picture your book giving to the readers?
That's a great question. So I founded the Grace Hopper Celebration, and as CEO, we grew the conference. And so in a few years ago, it was 30,000 people. So over the years, we had more and more women attending the conference. And I got to know a lot of women. So I got to know thousands of women who were entering the technology field. And they had this fire in their eyes. They really wanted to make a difference in technology. I noticed that fire tended to diminish, and many of them left after about 5 years. They just didn't feel like they belonged. And so so that was the catalyst for me writing the book. And I initially started talking to college students about how they could have more courage and find community. But then what I realized was that it was all about the culture. I mean, there were leaders who worked in many technology companies that were very inclusive and innovative. And I wanted to be able to tell those stories.
Great. That's truly inspiring. So, your book challenges the myth of meritocracy in the tech field, yeah. So, for the engineers and data-driven thinkers in our audience, what's the most compelling evidence or data points you've seen that demonstrates how biased systems can overlook talent?
Well, you can, I mean, the evidence, there's a lot of studies. I mean, there's a lot of social science work that demonstrates how women are not often promoted at the same rate as their male counterparts. I mean, and so I mean, there's been studies about bias. It's pretty easy to detect. There's some wonderful tests that you can take that really you can face your own bias. And so I do think that most people realize that at least others are biased. It may take them a little longer to see how they're biased. But what I realized is that many of the companies that I worked with, they wanted to promote diversity and inclusion, but it was a checkbox. I mean, that's really, people did it because they were told to do it, so they would create programs, but there wasn't the underlying belief in what was going on. And if you look at the companies that are more successful in my book, it's really people who embraced how can you solicit ideas from all your people and provide forums where ideas can be surfaced and listened to and criticized. I mean, I really do feel like it's not just about having more people of a diverse background. It's about helping the people who've joined your organization to take on more responsibility, to have leaders that represent from a wide variety of different genders, racial, and ethnic backgrounds.
Okay, that's interesting. So, can you walk us through what you call the six C's framework?
Yeah. So the six C's. One of the points of my book is that creativity is one of the fundamental skills for everyone. You can't have a technology revolution unless you have a group of people who are creative. So it starts with creativity, courage to take risks, which for me is at the heart of my story. Developing a culture of confidence, which means that you're promoting confidence in all the people that work for you, promoting curiosity, finding ways to learn a lot about all kinds of different ideas and bringing the best of those back to your company. Communication, you can't really share your idea unless you can effectively communicate what that idea is. And as an engineer, many of the engineers I know, they don't want to communicate. They just want to go sit down and do the work. And part of my point is that you need to communicate. And then last but not least is community. I mean, community is the ground that we all live in and grow in. And it's through our community that you feel like you belong, that you have people who will back you up. I mean, it's just a really important idea.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. So, can you walk us through how these principles like courage and confidence can act as a practical operating system for a team, similar to how engineers think about systems architecture?
Right. Well, if you think about it, you are, when you're creating a new architecture, at least of the kind, chip architectures are what I'm most familiar with. You, you are creating a plan, you actually everything in its place. It's the systems that allow you to go ahead and design a new architecture. It's sometimes the tools that allow you to explore different architectures. In much the same way, if you look at rebooting your culture, you're providing ways in which your staff can exhibit these characteristics. So, for example, if the courage to take risks, when I talk in the chapter, I mean, the first thing you want to show is that you take risks and you want to acknowledge when you're taking risk as the leader of the organization. Then you want to, when people start to mention different ideas, you want to encourage them. So it's really all about encouraging people to take risks. Confidence falls very quickly on courage because it, for many engineers, you have to find that confidence inside yourself to suggest your idea. And that often comes back to courage. Curiosity, once again, I mean, the best managers are providing external information to their staff. So if you have a large team, you might have professors, academic professors, that you invite to speak that may challenge some of the ideas within your organization. Or you may have sessions or webinars that really promote new ideas. So it's all about providing different perspectives from different fields and not getting stuck in the silos that so often we get caught in. Once again, communication, you want to be able to provide opportunities for your staff to communicate ideas. So establishing forums where people suggest different ideas, or having a regular, pseudo conference where people come in and share their ideas is one way to encourage communication. And then for communities, many companies have what they call ERGs, employee research groups, which allows people with something in common to come together to support each other.
Wow, that sounds like a well laid out framework. That was truly insightful, Telly. So, I
Thank you.
think I read somewhere where you mentioned experiencing both excellent teams that create innovation and dysfunctional ones that produce flawed design. So, from your perspective, what is the single most important cultural quote unquote bug that causes a technically brilliant team to fail?
Well, I mean, it's the lack of communication. It's the lack of teamwork that often causes a team to fail. But if you look at companies, I mean, some of the executives I talked to, they the underpinnings of their entire team is a focus on quality. So if you're designing a chip, it's a very complicated fabrication process, and that's, like I said, that's my background. And so there are many places where you can test your design long before you fabricate it. But the company culture itself, you want it to emphasize quality and not tolerate mistakes. Or, I mean, and you can do that as a leader of engineering. You can do that in a couple of different ways. You can always do a diagnosis of problems that occurred. You can solicit ideas from your team members about how you might have not run into this quality issue. But you always want to develop a product that meets certain quality criteria.
Okay, so this lone genius myth is quite powerful in tech. So how do we as an industry start to better measure value and reward the creative collaboration that actually builds great products?
Yes, such a great question. There's a lot of documentation that says that the lone genius is a myth. I mean, if you look at people like Steve Jobs, who is often considered a brilliant entrepreneur, he always worked with a team. There was always a team involved. And Elon Musk, even though he's well recognized as an important leader, he also works with a team. So this idea of the lone genius is a myth. And if you're looking from a leadership level, you want to make sure that you include recognition for the team, not just for the singular lone genius that is it's so commonly referred to. And this is a cultural change, much like in everything else in my book is about that. But any great leader, um, just take the time to recognize the team, not just individuals. That's the single biggest step that you can take.
Interesting. So you say that curiosity is a skill, not just a trait. So, what does a curiosity building exercise or meeting agenda look like for a technical team stuck in execution mode?
Okay, so, when you're in super execution mode, you, sometimes just have to do whatever it takes to get this particular product done. So you have to first determine the time in which you want to introduce the idea of curiosity. But many of the great products that, you see are because revolutions from one industry are applied to a different industry. And so, and so that's what curiosity can provide you, is taking ideas from other fields and applying them to what you're doing. And, for the chip companies that I worked in a few years ago, there was always the software team and then there was the hardware team. And the fact that they did not communicate better caused problems. And so the hardware team, for example, because they're more comfortable with hardware, would put features in the hardware that the software couldn't use. And so it was a waste of time. It was, and it didn't help. Whereas the software team, um, they didn't learn enough about the hardware to make sure that the software that they're developing for this particular piece of hardware worked well. So that's a simple example about how curiosity about the work of each other can greatly enhance the product definition and development.
Okay, that's interesting. So, for the technical leaders and managers listening, what's one tangible, actionable step they can take this week to start fostering a greater sense of community within their team?
Well, I have a few things that you could do, but probably the most important thing for managers is to learn to listen. I do think that quite often in engineering cultures, people get caught up in their own expertise and they forget to listen to other people and understand their expertise and how what they're working on could enhance the work that you're doing. So that's the first thing. I also think for most people, the courage to take risks is really something that is often not embraced. And yet, when an opportunity presents itself and learning to say yes to the opportunity rather than finding all the reasons why you don't want to do it is something that can have really profound impact.
Okay, so from your PhD in computer science to your executive roles, I would say you've seen the tech industry from multiple angles. So I'd like to ask, how has your technical background specifically informed your approach to solving these human and organizational challenges in tech?
Uh, Great question. Yeah, so I was head of engineering for many years, I mean, 20 years or so. And when I pivoted and took over the helm of the Anita Borg Institute, which was a nonprofit, the first thing that surprised me after I did it is that many of the skills I had already learned as an engineering leader applied to the nonprofit. I mean, most of what you need to do for any project is the same: setting goals, trying to reach for more, learning to scale. I mean, those are some of the ideas that you have to embrace when you are an engineering leader, and also in terms of running a nonprofit. I um i do think that the art, you talked about architecture, and when I was working in the chip industry, the architecture of a chip was really fundamental to everything that you did. And this idea of an architecture can be applied to any program. So thinking about the architecture of, in our case, the conference that we ran, which was, scaled from 500 people attending to 30,000, you needed to understand the bones, how how those people came together in a way that allowed them to feel appreciated. And that So, and that is no different than building of architecture of a chip, except that there's people running around rather than, you signals.
Wonderful. That's such a great response there. So, Telly, what is the most underutilized or underestimated lever for creating a more inclusive culture that you believe more companies should be focusing on?
Okay. So for companies that want to build an inclusive culture, they need to, eh, this needs they need to think about this in every step that they take. And I already mentioned listening. I mean, the first step is to, as you create change within your organization, is ask the people who already work there, what are the changes that they would like to see? I mean, most of the tech organizations that I know of, as they created things like the ERGs, they talked to the people who would actually attend these before they created them. So that and engineering leaders, frankly, often are not spending enough time listening to others. But the other part that I is really important is thinking about your pipeline. So it's fine to have diversity goals. So, for example, I mean, I'm making this up, but let's say you want to hire 25% of your new hires are women, and so are from different countries or different races. You can track. I mean, engineers like this because they can track it so easily. But that really doesn't make the difference. What makes the difference is if you help take all of these new hires that you're bringing in and give them exposure to new roles and have them take on um, new assignments. And I talk at length about this, about what they call the fellows pipeline, which is a fellow is often the highest technical role that you can have in a company. And what really matters is to look at your pipeline and make sure that a very wide set of people are in the pipeline and that they have the opportunity to learn more skills and be considered for promotions. A great leader is thinking about this all the time. And here's the thing is that those engineering leaders are also thinking about the engineering problem that's in front of them. So you're developing a new product, but it's taking into account the people that can help you to do that.
Oh, wow. That's interesting and insightful. So, I'd like to ask, looking at the current generation of students entering tech, what gives you the most hope about the future of the industry's culture?
Well, it's so, right now we're in a big time of change. And so I don't think any of us really understand how the students that are graduating today are going to find their way into the technology organizations. But I've now been around long enough to see these changes, over the last 30 years where there's big revolutions and people are very afraid of this new technology. But then the people who are just graduating, they try. I mean, they first of all take a job where they can learn something. And sometimes that job doesn't look quite like what they had hoped for when they graduated, but they take what's available and they continue to learn. They, as you enter a company, you need to understand what's important to the product of that company and develop those skills. So, for example, let's talk about AI and the way that it's impacting a lot of the new hires. I mean, you see a lot of social media and media covering that there's going to be less engineers hired. But there are some companies that are hiring more entry level engineers because this is the generation that's AI native, that people who have gone through college have been exposed to AI for quite some time. And so, from a company's perspective, having these new engineers that have this sort of innate skill of AI can help as you form your next generation product. I mean, here's the thing that I know about technology is that all the ideas about where AI is taking this are likely to be wrong. That,
Hmm.
I mean, if you look like the dot-com busts in 2000, I mean, there was all these ideas about being online, and they blew up. But in the background, at that time, companies like Google and Amazon were tiny, and they were starting to develop these new technologies that used the internet. And then eventually they came back and they brought a new idea of how we use the internet. And with AI, I do think that that's where we're at. That I mean, people are using AI, and for many engineers, it becomes an advisor on the side. Um, and so you can perhaps develop more code because you have an entity that's helping you. But AI is going to be most powerful when it's for the different fields. So, for example, if you have um, uh, a medical diagnosis tool that uses AI, that that builds in a lot of information about people's medical history that can help inform those diagnoses. And I do think that AI, in some fashion, will revolutionize the medical profession, but it will also be in taking notes when you're in a doctor's office. I mean, there's just a lot of different places where you're going to see AI helpful. It isn't going to replace people. It's going to augment what they can do.
Okay, so if you could instill one core belief in every new engineer graduating today, what would it be?
Well, it's the confidence, the ability to that I can help. So goes back to the courage to take risks. That you need to embrace your own confidence. And so when your manager says we're building this new XYZ, that you raise your hand and say, "Well, I'd like to be part of that team." So once again, engineers are good at solving problems, and they underestimate how important it is to say, I want to do this project. And I can even give you an example. So there was one of the people I interviewed in my book was a man named Colin Paris, and he was the CTO at GE at the time when I interviewed him. And he
Okay.
talked about early in his career when he wanted to take on more. He wanted to be promoted. That's really what he wanted to be. And so he went to one of the key leaders in IBM at the time where he was. And he says, I want to do this. And Nick said, well, you got to work hard. And so but he gave him some opportunities to be on task forces and different sort of extra projects that got him FaceTime with a lot of the key leaders at the company. And
Hmm.
through that effort, he ended up being promoted.
Wow, that's such an interesting story. So tell us, after a lifetime of work at the intersection of technology, culture, and human potential, what does the word innovation truly mean to you now?
So it's interesting because if you look at my work, I mean, innovation is always about thinking outside the box. Now that's an overused phrase, but challenging yourself to think more broadly about a problem that you believe you know a lot about. And it's important to continue to challenge yourself in what you're doing. I mean, for example, I wrote a book. I had never written a book. I didn't even know what writing a book looked like. And so it really did challenge my whole fundamental approach to work. And it was scary because you're putting yourself out there for a lot of people. So it's important. The other point I'll make about innovation is it's always about the people. I mean, as an engineer, we tend to get caught up in the product or the thing right in front of you. Um, but ultimately, career success is all about the people. Um, it isn't who you know, it isn't what you know, it's who knows what you know that will get you ahead.
Awesome, awesome. Finally, for our listeners who are inspired to dive deeper into your framework, your book, Rebooting Tech Culture, I think it's kind of like the next perfect step. So, what's the best place for them to find your book, or find you or contact you to ask general questions, or just follow your work?
So I have a website. It's my name. So tellewhitney.com, TELLEWHITNEY.com. And on the website, you can also find a page devoted to my book and where you can order it. But it's widely available at every place that sells books. I'm also on LinkedIn, and also because of my name, I'm pretty easy to find. But that's the social media that I use the most.
Wonderful. Lee, it's been a really insightful conversation with you, and I'm excited to have you on the show today.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.